So here is a tweet about tallying totalitarianism. I don't use that exact term, but it's kind of in that range, so we'll talk about this. When we tally it up, words we're not allowed to say, people we're not allowed to associate with, stores we're not allowed to shop at, websites we're not allowed to read, thoughts we're not allowed to have, and so forth. That's a whole lot of control. I choose freedom. So let's tally it up. Words we're not allowed to say. We do live in this world where a lot of people subscribe to a code of political correctness, or they might have a modern religion, for example, censorship. These systems of moral virtue and universal truth, how to make society better, how to improve everything through these rigid codes, these systems for real world moralism. So I say that ideology and reality run on separate interweaving tracks. Sometimes ideology has a big purpose, and I subscribe to little bits and pieces of all kinds of ideologies. We all do. We all do. We're all biased towards some form of thinking, some type of belief system, or some way that the cogs turn in our heads. Okay? I suppose you could call them the cognitive cogs. I'm not framing that way at this time, I suppose. But words we're not allowed to say, well, it's mostly a social permission thing. It's social ostrich. What's the cost of saying a word you're not allowed to say? You get ostracized by people for saying words. It's almost like you're being scolded by your teacher or your parents or your grandparents or something. Somebody's actually out there in society saying, you can't say that word. That word makes you a bigot, or it makes you a bad person. You are a bad person. They do that a lot. And then those bad people, they become people we're not allowed to associate with. There are lots of people out there, they say just because they said something or they did something once, you can't associate with them. You're being influenced. They're influencing you to be a bad person. I don't care how old you are. I don't care how long you've been in this world or what you've seen, what you've done. That person there makes you look bad. And I say, I'm with Scott Adams on this one. I say, you shouldn't tell me who I can talk to, associate with, do things with, what I can say, and so forth. Because, frankly, why do you assume that they're influencing me? I mean, we're all influencing each other. We're all being brainwashed every minute of every day by ourselves and others. We convince ourselves of things other people do. Media, all the time watch that we spend looking at our screens, the eyeball time, we're being influenced. We're being influenced by what's happening outside. But why assume that this bad hombre, this bad lady, is influencing me? What if I am influencing her, or him, or him? Why is it assumed that I can't improve their outlook? They can only ruin or create a negative effect on my outlook. So we have people we're not allowed to associate with. We're not allowed. I mean, we are allowed to do it. It's freedom. But, we get that ostracization, which I still can't say. Then we have stores we're not allowed to shop at. Now, again, this isn't something you're going to see very normally. I think this tweet was written in the context of them blackballing certain stores for their political beliefs, ideological beliefs. So that's kind of what we're talking about here, where Now if you go to, say, for example, I think the classic example was Chick-fil-A. They say, well, you're going to Chick-fil-A? You're going to Chick-fil-A? But they have a very Christian religious view on gay marriage. They have an opinion that they've donated to this cause that I happen to not agree with. And I go, it's fucking chicken. It's really good chicken. I mean, it's not about not being allowed to go. It's about the social permission to go. There's a word I can say. Social permission. So that's another form of control. We have websites we're not allowed to read. Again, we are allowed. I have to say that again and again. Certain websites, if I happen to share a link from, say, 4chan, where anonymous and other people go to spread their message and to have fun, if I happen to go there, or any other website, Infowars.com. Now we're seeing some other things happen too with websites where, I use Gab, for example. Not as often as I'd like, but I enjoy Gab. I enjoy the Dissenter app. I enjoy the free speech web browser. I like Gab Trends. These are all just tools for gathering information on our epistemological journey. But people would say, wait a second, that's a white supremacy site, or that's a white nationalist. It was always this race thing, like, oh, only conservatives use Gab. And I'm like, yeah, because people like you, which we've invited, I'm not a conservative per se, I'm an independent, but people like me that are a little bit on the right about some things and a little bit on the left about others. I'm just saying, like, this is a free speech alternative to Twitter. It's an alternative to Twitter. So if Twitter doesn't work for you, you can go to Gab, right? You can check out Gab, or you can go to Minds.com, or you can go to Mastodon, or any of these other services. There's a new one called Locals. Okay, and there's a ton of different video services, but it's all about alternatives, folks. It's all about alternatives. I'm not thinking about, like, of course, we do have a propensity to go into the echo chambers that have the messaging that we're comfortable with. We're not constantly disagreeing with people, especially if a topic has been, if you're pushing 40 years old and you've already gone through every other debate with people on a certain political topic. Yeah, you kind of don't need to constantly be challenged on the same question for 20 years straight. I think we all go through this journey of finding our ideologies and finding all this stuff. It's still good to have an intellectual dialogue, of course, but a lot of times they're right about Gab. There has formed, it's a bit more of an echo chamber, just like Twitter at large. When you look at the big, the trending things, it's all very much got a skew. But I think that doesn't mean we can't all enjoy each other's presence and have fun, have a dialogue, make fun of each other, troll, whatever we want to do, share beautiful artwork, share science, share news, whatever it is that independent content creators and providers want to do, they can do on Gab, on Twitter. It doesn't matter. It doesn't need to be ideologically based. So, but they say, you're not really, I look at that and that's a symbol, a label that I just have, my pattern recognition picks that up as something negative, as something that I want to avoid. And I don't know why you're there. There might be something wrong with you just for using that. Maybe if you don't use it, I'll feel more comfortable talking to you. Now, of course, that's not every person. There's a lot of people that are much more open-minded than that. But that is the environment that the media sought to create around websites like Gab. And, of course, I'm sure BitChute would also be in that ballpark as well. So then we continue on to thoughts we're not allowed to have. Mind reading is impossible, so what we do is we will post a thought. And people will say, oh my God, you are not allowed to have this thought. This is outside. I'm going to have you blocked, brigaded, reported. You're not allowed to have this thought. Is it a truthful thought? That's not the question. It's offensive. If it's offensive, it doesn't matter how much truth is in it. That's what, we're seeing out there. We're not allowed to have certain thoughts. Certain things are censored. And of course, they're not censored on an even-handed basis. Sometimes it's ethos-based. If one person says something, another person could say the same thing. And, maybe it's a factor of human error where you can't punish everybody equally. I don't believe in punishment, by the way. I don't believe in blocking or any of that stuff. Okay. Let me correct myself in real time. I believe in blocking, if you want. I believe in muting, but I think when you start to report things that are, when you brigade people on social media, when you get a group together and say, okay, there's 500 of us, all of us go to this one tweet and brigade it. Get in there and tell Jack Dorsey of Twitter, tell him we have to get rid of it right now. And make it a pile on the requests. I have free speech absolutism as my default, but I've often talked about, like in my video, Peace and Truth, available on YouTube. I did talk about the limits of free speech for a functioning society. You can't have absolutely free speech. You can't have things that incite violence or cause problems like that. But of course, it's subjective as to what is truly powerful enough or direct enough to incite violence. And so people will use those excuses. They'll say it's hateful conduct because people found it offensive. They found it offensive. And then you look at it and you're like, well, again, YMMV, your mileage may vary because you might not see it as offensive while others do. And there are things that offend you that might not offend others. So we're always in this irrational human conscious state where we don't know what's going on. We're all individuals. There's 7+ billion of us, and we have all of our own preferences, in-group preference. We have bias, and we only know the world that we've seen through these fleshy orbs in our face. We only know what we've heard through our ears. This technology, this organic computer on our heads, this brain processing, this CPU, it's pretty limited technology, and it's prone to error. And so, we try to subscribe to things like consensus reality. Oh, if everybody's doing it, I'll do it, which of course was a big experiment when we had our masks and all of our social distancing protocols due to coronavirus in the past 3 or 4 months. We actually tested this idea of like how much are you willing to go along with? Like how much authoritarianism will you put up with to achieve security, the security from the virus? So those questions actually were raised in public consciousness for a long time. But even then, there were people that were reporting tweets and saying you're not allowed to have certain thoughts. You're not allowed to say that there's a light at the end of the tunnel, that President Trump is right, that their lockdowns will end, that people will get back to, forming crowds and going to the movies, perhaps, or starting a riot. Of course, that's the obvious implication there. But we had people saying, like, you can't talk about hydroxychloroquine. The president is endangering people. And it's this drug that's been around for decades and decades. It's been tested. And never does the government say, go out and try it without the preface of talk to your doctor. If you cut things out of context, have you ever had that? Leave me a comment below. But I choose freedom. I will say the words we're not allowed to say, talk to the people we're not allowed to associate with, go to the stores we're not allowed to shop at, read the websites we're not allowed to read, have the thoughts we're not allowed to have, and so forth. That's a whole lot of control that I've just thrown out the window because we're about individual agency here. And of course, we have to obey law and order, keeping things safe. And I think when people say you're not allowed to do this, you're not allowed to do that, you're not allowed to do this, I think that there's an underlying current of moral virtue there, There's moralism there. There's people that are trying to improve the world for everybody else. So I have a lot of empathy. I have a lot of sympathy for that. But in the end, I choose freedom. I default to freedom. I think we only have so long on this earth to enjoy every moment, and letting people tell you what to do, it isn't right. You know, I think to keep society going, we have to have certain standards, certain laws, ethics, and rules. But I think people are starting to get a little bit too busybody. They might have a void in their life where they're missing control. And so the modern religion of moral panic or any of these others, outrage culture, gives them some control. They can say, well, wait a second. Here's something that I can be a part of. Here's a group, here's a tribe that I can be part of. We're all going to just tell this person that they can't be here, or this thing that it's no good for society. And I respect the agency. I just don't necessarily agree with this what's the word? Reductionist philosophy that you want to get rid of more stuff just because you don't like it. I say the more information you have, the better. The more options I have to enjoy things, the better. I don't want to be limited to a narrow window of possibility and opportunity. I choose freedom.